Good evening to the members of the Madras Bar Association and the Tax Association, which has invited me to speak on the recent 2015 and 2019 amendments to the 1996 Arbitration Act, which is in force in India. This act, the 1996 Act, came as a consolidating act. The first part deals with domestic arbitrations, that's part 1 of the act, and part 2 of the act deals with the enforcement of New York Convention awards and Geneva Convention awards. The 3 acts which were repealed, one was the 1940 Act, which dealt only with domestic arbitrations, and the other 2 acts were the Foreign Awards Act of 1961, which pertained to New York Conventions, and the 1937 Act, which pertained to Geneva Convention awards. So now we had one consolidated act, which was for domestic arbitrations, the first part, and the second part was enforcement of foreign awards. Now, all foreign awards are not enforceable under the 1996 Act. I want to clarify that right at the outset. There are 3 kinds of awards which can come to India for enforcement. The first is an award which is passed under the New York Convention from a country which is also a signatory to the New York Convention and has been notified by the Government of India under Section 44 of the Act. If it is not notified by the Government of India, it cannot be enforced under Part 2 of the 96 Act. There is another procedure to be followed. The third award is with respect to non-convention countries. What is the procedure to be followed? It is not covered by the 96 Act. And the last part is Geneva Convention awards. As you know, Geneva Convention was passed in 1927, and I don't think there is a single award which now comes under the Geneva Convention. In fact, if both the countries are signatories to the New York Convention, it automatically replaces the Geneva Convention. In fact, Geneva Convention is more a relic of the earlier act, and it is pretty obsolete. It has actually no role to play in the 1996 Act anymore. Insofar as non-convention country awards are concerned, or those countries which are not notified by the Government of India, their awards are recognized if they become a decree in their respective countries and are enforced as a foreign decree in India under Section 44 A of the CPC. And the only judgment on this issue is a decision which was rendered in 1964 by a 4-judge bench of the Supreme Court called Badat and Company. I think it's in 1964 SCR, probably page 19, you can check that. That is the judgment which has clarified the position that the seat court should have issued a decree. It comes as a foreign decree for enforcement to our country. So this is broadly the conspectus of the enforcement of foreign awards in India. Now, insofar, during the working of the 1996 Act, there were various issues which arose, and a lot of judicial decisions were rendered with respect to various aspects. The most important crucial issues which came up for consideration was the nature of power which is exercised under Section 11 by the Chief Justice in making an appointment of an arbitrator. The second was the permissible extent of judicial intervention under either Section 8 or under Section 11. The third aspect was with respect to arbitrability of certain kinds of disputes. Another area was with respect to the enforcement of domestic and foreign awards. And the last area which I'll briefly deal with is also the public policy defense under both Section 34 and Section 48 of the 1996 Act. These are the broad areas which did generate a lot of judicial decisions, some of which were legislatively overruled by the 2015 Amendment Act. And I will deal now with broadly the broad features of the 2015 Amendment Act. The significant changes which were made by the 2015 Amendment Act, the first was that the definition of the term court, it was redefined. With respect to international commercial arbitrations, it was vested exclusively in the high courts. With respect to domestic arbitrations, it was said that the court, the appropriate court, will be the principal civil court of original jurisdiction in a district or the high courts where they were exercising original jurisdiction. The second significant amendment was made was with respect to Section 2.2, wherein a proviso was inserted. This was to make provision for the availability of interim relief under Section 9, an appeal under Section 37 from an order passed under 9, and third was the availability of court assistance in taking evidence under Section 27 with respect to foreign-seated international arbitrations. Because foreign-seated international arbitrations, when they came to India, there was no provision in Part 2 of the Act which made provision for interim relief or for assistance in taking evidence, etc. And this came to light when the Bhatia and Balko judgments were delivered. In the Bhatia judgment, a 3-judge bench had said that Part 1 would be equally applicable to Part 2 arbitrations and foreign-seated arbitrations, except if they were expressly or impliedly excluded. The Constitution bench in the Balko judgment overruled both Bhatia and Venture Global and said Part 1 and Part 2 are entirely distinct. Part 1 does not apply to Part 2 at all. They are based on the principle of territoriality. Part 1 is confined to domestic arbitrations or arbitrations which are seated in India, and Part 2 pertains to enforcement of foreign awards. To overcome this lacuna in a foreign-seated arbitration where there was a requirement of interim relief, Section 9 was in Part 1 and therefore would not automatically apply to Part 2. So this proviso was introduced in Section 2.2 to say that even for foreign-seated arbitrations, one could move Section 9, the appellate provision under 37, and also they could move the Indian courts for assistance in taking evidence under Section 27. So to this limited extent, these 3 sections became applicable to foreign-seated arbitrations to overcome the lacuna in the Act. The third important section which I want to dwell on is, there were 2 significant amendments made in Section 8, which is the power of the judicial authority to make a reference to arbitration. The first one was that Section 8 now provided that not only a party to the arbitration agreement, but any person claiming through or under a party could file an application before a judicial authority for reference to arbitration. This was done to overcome this lacuna, and it brought it at par with Section 45 in Part 2 of the Act, which contained this provision that any person claiming through or under a party could also move an application for reference to arbitration. The second significant amendment in Section 8 was a non-obstante clause was introduced, which provided that notwithstanding anything contained in any judgment, decree or order of the Supreme Court or any court, the parties would be referred to arbitration unless it finds that prima facie no valid arbitration exists. This was to overcome legislatively certain decisions passed by the courts wherein it had been held that certain issues had to be decided at the threshold, and only after they were resolved could the matter be referred to arbitration. The legislature now deemed it appropriate to provide that you don't get into threshold issues under Section 8. If you find a valid arbitration agreement, you straightaway make the reference. Jurisdictional issues to be decided by the tribunal under Section 16. The whole principle of arbitration is minimal judicial intervention and party autonomy. Once a tribunal is constituted, then it is for the tribunal to decide all jurisdictional objections and issues and not the court. So this situation was resurrected by the 2015 Amendment Act. Section 11 was the next provision where substantive changes were made. The power under the Principal Act was conferred on the Chief Justice of the High Court with respect to domestic arbitrations and the Chief Justice of India with respect to international commercial arbitrations for appointment of an arbitrator. If the parties had agreed to arbitration, but they failed to make the appointment for whatever reason, or there was a disagreement, the party could move the court under Section 11, which is termed as the default power of appointment, which would be exercised by the High Court for domestic arbitrations and the Supreme Court for international commercial arbitrations seated in India. So now the power was shifted from the Chief Justice of the High Court to the High Court itself, and from the Chief Justice of India to the Supreme Court with respect to international commercial arbitration. So this was the first significant change which came about in Section 11. The second aspect was that a clarificatory amendment was made that this power would not be treated as a delegation of judicial power. The third aspect was that a very, very important subsection was introduced which continues to remain in operation even today despite the 2019 Amendment Act, and that was subsection 6A in Section 11. Subsection 6A now provides that what is the scope of examination when the court makes an appointment of an arbitrator. It is confined only to the examination of the existence of the arbitration agreement and no more. You cannot go into other issues, whether jurisdictional issues, whether it's arbitrable, whether it's not arbitrable, whether it's a live issue, etc. All these issues are to be decided by the tribunal or the sole arbitrator and not by the court. The only scope of examination is the existence of an arbitration agreement. In fact, I'll pause here for a minute. There is a difference between Section 8 and Section 11. Section 8 says the existence of a valid arbitration agreement. Section 11 says the existence of the arbitration agreement. So the scope is even narrower in 11. Now these amendments have legislatively overruled, in a way, the judgment in Patel Engineering of the Constitution Bench, which had said that this power is a judicial power and cannot be delegated to any institution or person. There were issues, threshold issues, jurisdictional issues on whether the claim is a live one or not, whether there was accord and satisfaction in executing a discharge voucher, whether the dispute was arbitrable. These issues in Patel Engineering, the Constitution Bench had said, were required to be decided by the court before making the reference. The 2015 amendments say that this is no longer valid. It has to be done by the tribunal and not the court. The court must just see if there is an existence of an arbitration agreement, then the matter has to be referred to the tribunal or the sole arbitrator to decide the issue. 6b, subsection 6b is another new provision which has been introduced in section 11, which provides that the delegation of the power by the Supreme Court or the High Court shall not be regarded as a delegation of judicial power. These are the more significant amendments with respect to section 11, that is the power of appointment. The third category of amendments which I feel are most important are with respect to section 12, that is on conflict of interest of an arbitrator in deciding an issue. There was a vast amount of jurisprudence which emanated from the court with respect to a sole arbitrator being appointed or a named arbitrator being appointed, particularly in the context of government contracts, as to whether there would be a conflict of interest or not, because the issue of lack of bias and independence and impartiality of an arbitrator is a non-derogable provision of the Act. It is mandatory that an arbitrator is completely independent and impartial while deciding the issue. So with respect to this, section 12 was substantially amended. There are two schedules which have been introduced in the Act, that's Schedule 5 and Schedule 7, which set out the degree of relationships and the nature of relationships where a conflict of interest can be considered to be a ground for an arbitrator to be removed from the position of adjudicating the dispute between parties. Schedule 5 and Schedule 7 are based on the IBA conflict of interest of arbitrators. These guidelines have been treated as soft law in foreign jurisdictions. That is, they are by way of guidance, they are not mandatory and binding. But the legislature has incorporated these schedules which are based on these guidelines and has given it a statutory flavor. I think India is the only country which has incorporated it in its statute. The arbitrators are now required under Schedule 6 to make two mandatory disclosures. One is with respect to their independence and impartiality, with respect to both the subject matter with which they are dealing and the parties whose disputes are being adjudicated upon. The second disclosure is with respect to their time availability and the number of cases they are dealing with at the point of time when they make the disclosure, as to whether they would be able to complete the proceedings in the period which is now set out in section 29 capital A of the Act. So these two disclosures are mandatory and the format is given in Schedule 6 of the Act. Now, further, the next important amendment which has been brought about by the 2015 Amendment Act is Section 17, which has now empowered the arbitral tribunal to grant interim relief and brought it at par with Section 9, which is the provision where courts can grant interim relief to parties either before the proceedings commence, during the proceedings taking place, and after the award is made. Although a subsection has been introduced in Section 9, that is subsection 3, which says that once the tribunal is constituted, the courts would normally not grant interim relief during the pendency of proceedings, because this power must be exercised by the tribunal under Section 17. The next important provision which I would like to touch upon is Section 29 capital A, which I think is a salutary provision. I don't think any other arbitration legislation in any other country has a similar provision, which provides a time-bound period for the proceedings to be concluded and the award to be delivered. Prior to the 2015 amendment, Arbitrations went on for an indefinite period of time, and there was a huge time lag even before the awards were delivered. Arbitrations also became extremely expensive, with arbitrators charging a per sitting fee, and the costs mounted too much. So, to overcome this practical situation, this provision was incorporated so that the proceedings would be concluded and award rendered within a period of 12 months after entering upon reference. If the proceedings were still not concluded, the parties could agree to a 6 months extension and no more. If yet in the 12 plus 6 months the proceedings still did not get concluded, the parties could make an application before the court, and the court would decide as to what was the period of extension they would grant if sufficient cause was made out for the delay in concluding the proceedings. 29B is another provision which provides for fast track arbitration. I don't think it has gained currency in India, but it's based basically on only documents. There are hardly 1 or 2 hearings, and normally it is done by a sole arbitrator. It has been successful in the West with respect to maritime disputes, where the entire dispute can be decided on the basis only of documents, and oral arguments are really not required. So this provision has been introduced wherever parties mutually agree to have their proceedings fast-tracked. Another significant amendment was made in section 31(7)(b), which was taking into account the ground realities. Now 31(7)(b) of the Act provides for a statutory rate of interest which will start running on the amount awarded post the award. So it's for the post-award period. The statutory rate of interest under the Principal Act was 18%. This was amended because it was found commercially to be an extremely high rate of interest and a uniform rate which was applicable irrespective of the commercial and ground realities prevailing at a point of time. So the legislature amended it to be it would be plus 2% over the prevailing rate on the date on which the award was passed. 31(A) is another new provision which was inserted. This provides a regime for costs. It is by way of guidance to tribunals and arbitrators to provide costs under various heads. And it basically follows the principle that cost follows the event and has been adopted as per the Western model. Section 34 has also been amended, particularly with respect to the public policy defense, wherein it has been narrowed as a consequence of the decisions which were passed in ONGC and Western Gecko. Western Gecko, of course, was with respect to reasonableness of an award. To overcome this, Section 34 has been amended, which provides that an award can be set aside on the public policy ground only if either it was induced or affected by fraud or corruption or was in violation of Section 75 or Section 81. Second, if it was in contravention with the fundamental policy of Indian law. ONGC judgment had said that any statutory provision, if it is violated, it's a public policy defense. So they said, no, it has to be the fundamental policy of Indian law, which was enunciated in the Renu Sagar judgment of 1984. And the third point on which the public policy defense could be raised was in conflict with the most basic notions of morality or justice. Section 34 also now states that what is the test as to whether there is a contravention of the fundamental policy of Indian law. It must not entertain a review on the merits of the dispute, because the arbitrator is always considered to be the final arbiter on factual disputes. If there is an error of law, then the court may consider it, and not any error of law, but something which is fundamental to the policy of Indian law. I think the most important amendment which has been introduced by the 2015 Act is Section 36, which has been completely substituted. Section 36, as it was in the Principal Act, was interpreted in two judgments of the Supreme Court. One was National Aluminium and the other was NBCC versus Lloyd Insulation, to mean that the minute a party files objections under Section 34, the award becomes unenforceable. There's an automatic suspension of the award. To overcome this situation, where the matters would remain pending in the court for some time, it was considered appropriate to completely change this section, which now provides that once the award is passed, it does not become automatically unenforceable. A party must obtain a stay. That stay has to be on terms which the court considers appropriate, and the grounds for granting even a partial stay must be recorded in writing. So they have made it far more stringent. And if it is an award which is to pay an amount of money, then the principles under the CPC with respect to a money decree must be followed. Section 48 of the New York Convention Award, which provides the conditions for enforcement, has also been amended on the aspect of the public policy defense, and it has been given the same narrow interpretation as in Section 34, which I just spoke about. I won't repeat it. The 2015 Amendment Act has also introduced certain timelines for court proceedings with respect to arbitration cases. The first is that where an application is filed for appointment of an arbitrator under Section 11, subsection 13 of Section 11 says that it should normally be disposed of within a period of 60 days. The second timeline which has been incorporated is Section 29 capital A, subsection 9. If an application is moved before the court for extension of time to conclude the proceedings and make the award, that application should be decided within a period of 60 days. The third timeline which has been provided is in Section 34, that where objections are filed, the court should normally dispose it of within a period of 1 year. These are directory provisions but have been incorporated to dispose of court proceedings pertaining to arbitration as expeditiously as possible. The 2015 amendments have been lauded internationally. India's rating in the ease of doing business has got enhanced. From being 77, it has come down to 63, which is on account of the legislative amendments which have been made to the Arbitration Act, the new law which has been drafted with respect to insolvency, the IBC Code, the new Companies Act, and policy changes have been taken very well internationally, and India's ratings have gone up. However, enforcement of contracts, India is still lagging behind at number 163, because the World Bank has made an assessment that it takes almost 4 to 5 years with respect to enforcing a contract through the local courts in India. And that is one aspect which I think all of us as stakeholders, whether as lawyers or whether as judges, we have a responsibility with respect to the same, and we must address it because if the delays are interminable, especially with respect to foreign contracts and foreign awards, it can lead to investment treaty disputes being raised against the Republic of India. And this is of crucial importance, and that is why I thought I would spell out specifically the timelines which have been introduced by the 2015 Amendment Act, which must be observed by the courts so that we do not face a second award with respect to an investment treaty dispute. Soon after the 2015 amendments were brought into force, which was in October of 2015, just a year and a quarter later, the government set up a high-level committee, which was the Sri Krishna Committee, which made further recommendations with respect to arbitration legislation in India. The most important aspect was to move towards institutional arbitration from ad hoc arbitration. Almost 90% of arbitrations in India were being conducted by ad hoc tribunals, and they were pretty unregulated both with respect to the time taken and also with respect to the fees charged. To address these issues, both these amendments, the 2015 and 2019, were brought into force. Whatever were the 2019 amendments, the focus now was on institutional arbitration, and second was certain clarifications were required after the 2015 amendment, so certain clarificatory amendments were suggested. Now the 2019 Amendment Act has been brought into force, and I'll touch upon some of the salient features of it. The first most important amendment is the introduction of Part 1A, which is a new chapter which has been added for the establishment of a statutory body, which is called the Arbitration Council of India, which is to be set up for promotion of arbitration in India, for training of arbitrators, for training of lawyers, for accreditation of institutions, accreditation of arbitrators, so that the quality of arbitration which is conducted in our country is improved, make suggestions and recommendations for further legislative changes, maintain a depository of awards, because if they were ad hoc tribunals, who would maintain the award? So this issue was raised before the high-level committee by retired Supreme Court judges, that who maintains the record? When the matter comes to court, we need an authenticated copy. So it was decided that an electronic depository would be created for maintaining all awards which are passed in the country, and this would be tasked with the Arbitration Council of India. An eighth schedule was also inserted, which provided certain qualifications, minimum qualifications which an arbitrator must possess. These were only with respect to Indian arbitration practitioners and has really no application whatsoever to international arbitrators who come to our country to conduct their proceedings. It has no application to any foreign practitioner whatsoever. There has been a lot of misapprehension and misconception about Schedule 8, but Schedule 8 is applicable only to Indian practitioners. The Law Minister has recently, in a public event, clarified in no uncertain terms that the provisions of the 8th schedule are not applicable to foreign arbitration practitioners. They have been incorporated in Part 1 of the Act, which pertains to domestic arbitrations and has only reference to Indian arbitration practitioners. Section 11 has also been amended, which now provides that the Supreme Court, with respect to international commercial arbitrations, and the High Courts with respect to domestic arbitrations, will designate arbitral institutions which are graded by the Arbitration Council of India to carry out the process of making an appointment or exercising what is called the default power of appointing an arbitrator. So, therefore, the entire process will now be shifted from the courts to recognized arbitral institutions of credibility. I must pause here for a minute. Section 11, that is shifting the power from the courts to the institutions, has not been brought into force so far. It has not been notified for the moment. Therefore, the procedure as per the 2015 Amendment Act will continue to remain in force till the amendments to Section 11 are notified by the government. Section 17, a clarificatory amendment was brought about. The 2015 amendment had said that the arbitral tribunal will have the power to provide interim relief during the pendency of proceedings and even after the making of the arbitral award. Now, this was erroneous for the reason that once the award is passed, the tribunal becomes functus officio under Section 32 of the Arbitration Act. So, this part of Section 17 has been amended. It stops at only during the pendency of proceedings, and the part pertaining to post the award has been deleted. Section 23 and 29 capital A have also been amended. That is, that the period of 12 months will now start ticking from the completion of pleadings of the parties, for which they are given a period of 6 months, and thereafter the period of 12 months will commence. Section 37 has been amended. This is a very important amendment. There has been insertion of a non obstante clause, which says that notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, the appeals will be only governed by the 1996 Act. The background to this amendment is that there was certain confusion which occurred when the Commercial Courts Act was enacted, which was almost contemporaneous with the 2015 Amendment Act. They were contemporaneously enacted, and lawyers started filing appeals. A second appeal is barred under the 2015 Amendment Act. Lawyers started filing a second appeal under the Commercial Courts Act. So, to give clarity that you could neither go under the Commercial Courts Act or the letters patent, this amendment was brought about by a non obstante provision to say that you, notwithstanding any other law for the time being in force, the appeals are only as provided by Section 37 of the Act. There have been two other new provisions which have been added: 42A, that is confidentiality to be maintained in proceedings, and 42B, which provides immunity to arbitrators. These were missing in our Act. So these have, on the basis of other legislations, been incorporated in the 1996 Act. The last aspect which I will touch upon is Section 87 was inserted by the 2019 Amendment Act. This was to provide that the 2015 Amendment Act would be only prospective in nature and effect with respect to both arbitral proceedings and court proceedings with respect to arbitrations commenced after the 2015 Amendment Act. This was an amendment which was brought about pursuant to the recommendations made by the high-level committee so that past cases were not reopened. However, this amendment has been recently struck down by the Supreme Court in the Hindustan Construction case. And therefore, the situation as it prevails today is that insofar as arbitral proceedings which have been commenced after the 2015 Amendment Act came into force, it will apply to all such proceedings, and commencement, as you know, starts as per Section 21 when a notice for arbitration is served upon the other party. Insofar as court proceedings are concerned, it would apply to even those proceedings which are pending before the courts, even though the arbitral proceedings had commenced prior to that. So there is a dichotomy with respect to arbitral proceedings. It is only fresh proceedings commenced after the 2015 Amendment Act has come into force. And so far as court proceedings are concerned, it will apply irrespective of whether they were with respect to arbitral proceedings commenced after the 2015 Amendment Act or prior to it. So this is basically a conspectus of the 2015 and 2019 amendments. And even though the 2019 amendments, as I said a minute ago, came in for serious criticism by the arbitration practitioners who were practicing in other jurisdictions, the criticism was actually based on a misconception of the 2019 amendments, because they assumed that Part 1A was the Arbitration Council of Body was a regulatory body, that the qualifications prescribed under Schedule 8 would be applicable to foreign practitioners who came to India. And third is that they felt that these were perceived to be regressive in nature. But I think there was a misconception which has now been clarified by the public statements made even by the law minister, and even on an objective interpretation of the 2019 amendments. These are my thoughts which I thought I would share with you with respect to the 2015 and 2019 amendments to the 1996 Act. Thank you.